She wasn't afraid to die. That's what Rose said. She was afraid her kids wouldn't remember her. That sentence alone broke something in me. Because how do you hold on to someone you're about to lose? And how do you make sure the two small humans they leave behind never forget the sound of her voice, or the way her hugs felt like home? This isn't just a story about cancer. It's not just about death. It's about love, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, that shows up with everything it has, even when the ending's already written. On December 30th, 2025, the Kennedy family lost one of its brightest lights, Tatiana Kennedy Schlossberg. A daughter, a wife, a journalist, a mother of two. And for Rose, her big sister, she was the other half of her heart. But the story Rose has now shared isn't only about loss. It's about what you do when your sister is dying, and you're the only one who might be able to save her. Hang on, because what she did will stay with you. Forever. Long before the hospital visits, long before the diagnosis, it was just Rose and Tatiana. Two sisters born into one of the most watched families in American history. And yet, they never asked for any of it. Not the cameras. Not the expectations. Not the weight of a last name that followed them into every classroom, every whisper, every future headline. Rose Kennedy Schlossberg came first, born in 1988 to Caroline Kennedy and designer Edwin Schlossberg. The first grandchild of President John F. Kennedy. The first child of the only Kennedy daughter to survive. And the first real hope of a family that had lost too much, too soon, too often. Then came Tatiana, born in 1990. The middle child. The quiet observer. But in so many ways, the heart of it all. Growing up, they were never really just Kennedys. Their mother, Caroline, worked hard to shield them from that. After losing her own father to an assassin's bullet at age 5, and her uncle Bobby just 5 years later, Caroline had learned that fame didn't protect you. It haunted you. So she built a home rooted in normalcy, as normal as a Kennedy household could be. The three Schlossberg kids, Rose, Tatiana, and Jack, were raised not in the halls of Congress, but in New York City. They took the subway. They played in the park. They had dinner together every night. Caroline insisted on it. She knew the world would try to define her kids by what they came from. She wanted them to grow into who they really were. And for Rose and Tatiana, that meant growing together. Rose was the classic oldest child, protective, curious, a little more cautious than most realized. She looked like Jackie. Same wide eyes, same elegance, same stillness when she listened. Tatiana, she was the fire, the sharper tongue, the one who, as Caroline later said, never backed down from a question. If Rose inherited Jackie's beauty, Tatiana carried JFK's mind. But what made them powerful was what they shared, an unshakable bond. From childhood summers on Martha's Vineyard to school projects in cramped apartments, the sisters were inseparable. Rose once said Tatiana understood her better than anyone else on earth. And it showed. They finished each other's sentences. They wrote each other poems. And they were each other's best defense against the world's expectations. When Rose went to Harvard to study English, no one was surprised. She followed that with a master's degree in interactive telecommunications from NYU. She never sought office. Never gave speeches. Instead, she quietly moved through film production, co-creating a web series called End Times Girls Club in 2016, a quirky, smart, survival comedy for women facing the apocalypse. She said the idea came from watching New Yorkers during Hurricane Sandy, how underprepared so many people, especially women, were. The show wasn't just about disasters. It was about resilience, about laughing through fear, about being ready. Tatiana took a different road, but one no less meaningful. She studied history at Yale, then completed her master's at Oxford. But it wasn't the academic pedigree that defined her. It was how she used it. She became an environmental journalist, working for the New York Times. She didn't write to go viral. She wrote to warn. About climate change. About invisible pollution. About the damage we don't see until it's too late. And she was good. Really good. One editor said she had a quiet, cutting clarity. Her 2019 book, Inconspicuous Consumption, was praised for being both accessible and urgent. Tatiana didn't scream her points. She let the science speak, then added just enough fire to make you feel it. By 2023, both sisters had found their voice. Rose was living in New York, married to restaurateur Rory McAuliffe. Tatiana was living in Massachusetts, married to George Moran, a physician. They had 2 kids, Edwin and baby Josephine, and were, by all accounts, in the happiest season of their lives. They talked almost every day. Rose would send goofy videos. Tatiana would text jokes late at night. They still called each other sis, like they did as kids. Still had inside jokes. Still had a way of making the world go quiet when they were together. No one saw what was coming, because on the outside, Tatiana looked radiant. In May 2024, she was 9 months pregnant and still swimming a mile in the ocean. She joked to Rose that she could outpace Jack in a race, and she probably could. George had everything ready at home. Edwin was waiting to be a big brother. Josephine arrived safely. The house was filled with flowers and baby giggles and joy. But the nightmare started with something so small. A routine blood test. A white blood cell count that was just off. Then came another test. Then a meeting. Then more doctors. Then the truth. Tatiana had acute myeloid leukemia, AML. And not just any kind. A rare subtype with a deadly genetic mutation known as inversion 3. Doctors told her the truth. It was aggressive, resistant, dangerous. The kind of mutation that usually hits people in their 70s. Tatiana was 34, and she had just given birth. Rose said later, "I went from celebrating my niece to reading about chemo drugs within 24 hours. The whiplash was brutal, but Tatiana didn't crumble. She said, 'We fight.' And Rose didn't hesitate. When the doctors said a bone marrow transplant was the best chance for survival, the whole family was tested. The odds of a perfect match, even among siblings, was low. Maybe 30%. But somehow, Rose was the match. The best one. And without a second thought, she said, 'Take it all if it'll save her.' It started with needles, IVs, scans, blood draws that never seemed to end. But even then, Tatiana still smiled. Not because she wasn't scared. She was. But because she refused to let her kids see fear. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. Tatiana's leukemia wasn't the kind you can just throw chemo at and hope for the best. The inversion 3 mutation was ruthless, fast, and known for coming back, even after treatment. Most people don't survive it, and those who do are never quite the same. But Tatiana didn't flinch, because, as she told Rose, "I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for Edwin and Josephine." That's the kind of woman she was. She didn't care about timelines or statistics. She cared about first steps, birthday parties, holding her baby girl long enough for her to remember the warmth of her mother's arms. But to get even a chance at that, she needed a transplant. And that's where Rose stepped in. The process wasn't as simple as movies make it seem. Donating bone marrow means you're basically forcing your body to overproduce stem cells. For days, Rose had to take medication that made her bones ache and her joints swell. Then, hooked up to machines for hours, her blood was drawn, filtered, processed, until they had what Tatiana needed to survive. Rose never once asked if it would hurt. She only asked if it would work. And even then, nobody knew. Tatiana had to undergo intensive chemo first, enough to basically wipe her immune system to zero. Her hair fell out, her skin bruised from every needle. She lost her strength, but not her fire. She kept writing. She kept talking to her kids. She kept living, even when her body tried to convince her otherwise. And finally, when the chemo had burned through everything bad and good, they gave her Rose's cells. It was quiet, no dramatic music, just a bag of liquid hanging on a pole. A sister's blood flowing into another sister's veins. Hope in a drip bag. And then they waited. Every hour mattered. Every blood draw became a prayer. Were the new cells taking? Was her body accepting them? Would this work, or was it too late? And then it happened. A miracle. New white blood cells. Clean ones. Rose's cells were building a new immune system inside Tatiana's body. One without cancer. One that fought back. Tatiana went into remission. For the first time in months, she walked without pain. She picked up Josephine, really picked her up, not just held her. She danced with Edwin in the kitchen. She cooked dinner. She laughed at things that weren't tragic. And Rose, she watched from the couch, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "It's working." They called it the borrowed season, because no one pretended it would last forever. With inversion 3, the monster always lurks. But for a few golden months in mid-2024, Tatiana got to be just a mom again. Not a patient, not a headline, just home. She filled the house with light. She took Edwin to the park. She told Rose she felt like she had her life back. They made a pact not to waste a second. And they didn't. George, her husband, said those were the best months of their marriage. They lived slow. They talked about everything. They fought less. They cried only when no one was watching. Every night, Tatiana would tell Edwin and Josephine, "You're my favorite part of the world." She also started writing again. Not news stories. Personal stuff. Letters to her kids. Journals filled with memories. Lullabies she wanted someone else to sing when she couldn't. And to Rose, she said something she never said before. "I feel you in my bones. Literally. I'm alive because of you." It sounds poetic, but it was also painfully literal. Her sister's stem cells had replaced hers. She was literally living on Rose's blood, and it connected them in a way nothing else could. But even in joy, Tatiana knew the science. Remission isn't a cure. It's a pause. And by the end of 2024, the pause ended. It started with bruises that didn't fade. Then came the fatigue. The fevers. George noticed first, a subtle change in her energy. Rose brushed it off at first, trying to believe this wasn't what they feared. But deep down, they all knew. Tatiana's blood work confirmed it. The cancer was back. Stronger. Faster. Meaner. Even Rose's healthy cells couldn't stop it this time. And that's when Tatiana made a decision that broke everyone's heart and earned their endless respect. She said no. No to more chemo. No to another transplant. No to spending her last months in a hospital bed, hooked up to beeping machines. She chose to live. Not to fight until her body gave up, but to love until her spirit had nothing left. "I don't want my kids to remember me sick," she told Rose. "I want them to remember me dancing, laughing, holding them. That's the version of me I want them to carry." Rose cried when she heard that, but she didn't argue, because this wasn't surrender. It was bravery, the kind most people never understand until it's too late. Tatiana knew she didn't have forever, but she had now, and she was going to make now beautiful. They called it the quiet fight, because once Tatiana made her choice, to stop treatment, to spend what time she had left with her family, the war didn't end. It just changed shape. This wasn't a battle of blood tests and sterile rooms anymore. It was a war against the ticking clock, against fear, against everything she wouldn't get to see. First days of school, graduation gowns, first heartbreaks, first dances. But Tatiana didn't crumble. She created beauty in the middle of goodbye. She told Rose she didn't want pity. She wanted time, real time, time with meaning. Not just hours, but moments with weight, with laughter, with warmth. The kind you could tuck into a memory and hold onto like a blanket when the world got too cold. And so they built it. George transformed their home into a place of light. The bedroom was no longer just a resting place. It was a sanctuary. Family photos covered the walls. Letters from friends were taped near the windows. And every corner of the room glowed with reminders of who Tatiana was, not the patient, but the woman, the mother, the journalist, the sister. Tatiana still got up when she could. She still kissed her kids goodnight. She still asked Edwin about the clouds he saw that day and told Josephine the story of the moon who never stopped shining, even when the world turned dark. She recorded lullabies in her own voice. She wrote pages and pages of handwritten letters, one for each birthday she'd miss, one for Edwin's first big test, one for Josephine's first crush, one for every wedding dance, every holiday, every milestone she wouldn't see, but still wanted to touch. And then, in November 2025, when her body had grown too weak to carry her to the desk, she wrote one last essay, A Battle with My Blood. Published in The New Yorker, it wasn't a cry for attention. It wasn't even about her. It was a roadmap, a love letter, a warning, a promise, a reckoning. Tatiana wrote about how she wasn't afraid of dying, but terrified of what her absence would do to her mother. Caroline Kennedy had already buried a father, a mother, a brother. Too many loved ones. Now, she'd have to lose a daughter too. And that guilt, it tore Tatiana apart. She didn't write about politics. She wrote about legacy, and what it meant to live in a family where the camera never stopped rolling. And yet, so few people ever saw the truth. Still, Tatiana didn't hold back. In a paragraph that some say was quietly pointed at her cousin Robert F. Kennedy Jr., she defended the science that was keeping her alive, if only for a little while. "Science has saved my life many times," she wrote. "Not blind faith, not conspiracy, not noise. Medicine, research, truth." It was subtle, but clear. She believed in evidence, in experts, in the people who tried, even when they couldn't fix the outcome. But the part that shattered everyone? It wasn't about science. It was about her kids. She wrote, "My greatest fear isn't death. It's that Edwin and Josephine will forget me." Edwin was only 3. Josephine, just 18 months. Tatiana knew that memories at that age don't last. That voices fade. That photos can't hug. So she recorded her stories. Her laugh. Her bedtime whispers. The way she pronounced their names like a prayer. And still, she worried it wasn't enough. She wouldn't see Josephine graduate high school. She wouldn't be there when Edwin lost his first tooth. Or when someone broke his heart. She wouldn't walk them to the bus stop. Or sit in the front row of their college graduation. And that grief, that anticipatory maternal grief, was deeper than anything the cancer could touch. When the family read the essay, they wept. Caroline wept. George held it in until the kids were asleep. And Rose, she didn't just cry. She felt it, like her own soul had been placed inside every word. Because it was her soul, her blood, her sister, her best friend. Still, even in pain, Tatiana gave everyone grace. She asked Rose to keep telling the kids stories, to keep her alive in their bedtime routines, in their inside jokes, in their dreams. And Rose said yes. Of course she said yes. That December, Tatiana got weaker. Her legs gave out first, then her ability to walk. Eventually, her appetite disappeared. But she stayed home. She refused to die in a hospital bed with strangers. She wanted to hear her children laugh. She wanted sunlight on her face. She wanted to fall asleep to George's voice reading Goodnight Moon. So that's what they did. They made her world soft, gentle, familiar. And when Christmas came, they didn't dress up the house in lights. They lit candles, sat in a circle, read poems, let the kids crawl into bed beside her. Edwin kissed her nose. Josephine curled into her side. Rose sat at the foot of the bed, holding her hand. Just like she used to when they were kids, when Tatiana was afraid of thunderstorms and Rose promised the sky couldn't touch them as long as she stayed awake. That night, Tatiana whispered, "Sis, you gave me time." And Rose replied, "I just wish I could give you more." Tatiana smiled, too tired to speak. But her eyes said everything. "You gave me enough." By the final days of December 2025, Tatiana's body had surrendered to what her spirit had been fighting for far too long. She couldn't walk anymore. She rarely ate. Some days she barely spoke. But she was still Tatiana. Still there. Still aware of everything happening around her. Every small moment her children made. Every word her husband whispered. Every glance Rose gave her when she thought no one was looking. There's a strange stillness that settles over a house when someone is dying and everyone knows it. It's like the clocks run quieter. The walls breathe heavier. The air thickens, not with sadness exactly, but with something deeper, reverence. This was the house where Tatiana had once danced barefoot holding a colicky newborn to sleep. The same kitchen where she once laughed so hard she dropped a full tray of cookies, and everyone ended up eating them off the floor. Now, those rooms held something holy, because it was her last Christmas. No one said that out loud, but they knew. So the family gathered close, tighter than they ever had. Rose flew in and never left her side. Jack came and helped distract the kids. George converted the bedroom into a sacred space filled with stories and silence. Caroline brought food, warmth, quiet strength. All the things mothers bring when no words can fix what's broken. They didn't bother decorating the house with a big tree or lights or glitter. Tatiana had said weeks earlier, "I just want to feel them. That's all. Just one more time." So that's what they gave her. Edwin and Josephine, just 3 and barely 2, were lifted gently onto her bed on Christmas morning, wrapped in blankets, pajamas wrinkled, eyes wide and blinking in confusion, but warm with love. They curled into her like they always had. Tatiana whispered in Edwin's ear, telling him a story she'd made up the night before. Something about a talking snowman who couldn't find his hat, but had 2 little helpers who showed him how to listen to the wind. She touched Josephine's curls and softly hummed the lullaby she'd been singing to her since the day she was born. It didn't matter if the kids remembered the lyrics. She just wanted them to remember the feeling. Rose sat right beside her, quiet, holding Tatiana's hand with one hand, brushing Edwin's back with the other. Sometimes they didn't speak. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried without needing to wipe it away. George sat at the foot of the bed, reading a poem Tatiana had once written. Years ago, long before the cancer, before the kids, before the shadow came. And Caroline? She stood in the doorway, just watching. Arms folded, eyes steady, the way only a mother can stand when her daughter is fading, but still trying to smile. Tatiana looked around the room. She whispered, "This is everything." Later that evening, when the house quieted and the kids finally fell asleep beside her, she turned to Rose and said, "You gave me the gift of time." Rose broke. Right there. Just broke. She said, "I wanted to give you more. I feel like I failed you." Tatiana shook her head gently, barely able to move. "No," she said. "You gave me enough. I held my babies. I laughed. I lived. And I got to do it all because of you." It was one of the last full conversations they ever had. After that, Tatiana drifted more than she stayed awake. She'd wake up just long enough to ask what Edwin had eaten or to tell George she loved him. She'd smile when Jack told a dumb joke. She'd chuckle at something Rose said in a whisper. But mostly she slept. And on the morning of December 30th, 2025, with George on one side, Caroline on the other, and Rose still holding her hand, she left. There was no panic, no pain, just stillness, and then peace. Rose said later that the moment Tatiana took her final breath, it felt like time stopped. "A part of me died with her," she said. "But I also felt this responsibility, like I was the one who had to carry her now." That final morning, Rose promised Tatiana something. "I'll make sure your kids know who you were. Every single day. I'll tell them the stories. I'll remind them of your laugh. I'll show them what love looks like when it refuses to die." That wasn't a metaphor. It was a vow. Because in families like the Kennedys, with all their history and pain, legacy often becomes a burden. But this time, it became a lifeline. Tatiana didn't leave behind scandals or politics. She left behind truth. Letters, essays, children, a sister with a mission, and a Christmas that would never fade. Tatiana Schlossberg's story didn't end on December 30th, 2025. It lives on, in Edwin's giggles, in Josephine's quiet curiosity, in every bedtime story Rose tells them about their mother. Because love like that doesn't vanish. It roots itself deep. And it echoes. Tatiana didn't want to be remembered as a woman who died young. She wanted to be remembered as someone who lived, who wrote with fire, loved without limits, and stared death in the face without flinching. She wanted her children to know she fought, that she smiled even when it hurt, that she chose to go out surrounded by the people she loved, not tubes and machines, and that she left behind a sister strong enough to carry it all. Caroline Kennedy once walked behind her father's casket as a child. Now she's walking beside her daughter's grave as a mother. And somehow she's still standing. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even the brightest flames can be taken too soon, help us keep Tatiana's memory alive. Like, share, and subscribe to Real and Now for more stories that matter. And in the comments, leave your light for Tatiana. Because someone like her deserves to be remembered. Always.